No,
of the
it's a week
series.
2
Week 2.
or episode 3, 2.
Yeah.
We're doing
We-
this one like regularly from now on,
Yeah.
every week. If we can do it like we want to do
So
it.
yeah,
live
exactly. We've
streaming.
decided to talk about certain spiritual or esoteric subject
Yeah,
each week.
yeah.
We'll
So
upload 1 or 2 at least each week.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And see if you guys like it, and we'll keep talking and
Yeah.
chatting.
So what are we gonna talk today, John? Let's we decide what we decided last week is about the swastika. Meaning of the symbol meaning. Is today is like a more people misunderstand. It's like a more Nazi kind of symbol.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's swastika.
I mean, this is not been. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But it's like the swastikas from what is it, John? It's about the meaning of the symbol represents.
Well, I mean, swastika has been used since a very ancient time. You get it? Like, people, the common kind of idea people have about the swastika symbol is like, oh, it has association with the Nazi.
Even my Czech friend was saying when she saw the Japanese map, there's like she found a lot of like the swastika, and she said to me like, Japan's like what is this sort of Nazi symbol? But it's from the shrine, the jinja, the Shinto itself, the symbols.
Exactly. It's kind of interesting. Like in Japan, when they were planning Olympics, they had to actually change the symbol.
Oh really?
Of the map from the site, from the Japanese Google website, because the swastika in Japan symbolizes the temple, the Buddhist temple. Because in Japan it's called manji, and it's been used since Buddhism came here first. It's been used there, and so people in Japan don't have association of like negativity towards that symbol. It's actually a very auspicious symbol, and it has a tie with like that kind of Dharmic religion, which is like a Buddhism in case of Japan and everything. And you can see it being depicted even on the chest of Buddha with a swastika symbol and everything. So this atrocious association only happened in World War II when the Nazis decided to use that for their own kind of political.
But what's the reason why they chose this symbol? What is that, John? What is it from? What I know is like they like more into like occultism. Then that's why I chose it. But I can't make a connection. What does it mean? Like,
well, I mean, if people have looked into like the Nazi history in the more cultic kind of sense, there were actually a lot of like practicing occultists in actual Nazi party as well. Not many people talk about this, but if you actually studied it, there were like, I mean, Hitler in himself were obsessed with occultism and esotericism, and like
I heard that he was looking for immortality or this kind of thing, so that because he was afraid of like if he like conquer the world, what is like most problem, the big problem is what he thought it was is like how they can he control or like keep this the control. So that was he was looking for immortality or something like this. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of like connection with like different esoteric, like organization as well at that time.
Such as,
some people say Freemasonry as well, as well as like Rosicrucians as well. Like I'm not like too in-depth knowledge about this whole Nazi occultism. There's like whole literature about this association with him and occultism. And it's like, well, they want to get to the point where it's like why they've used it and everything. And before that, I need to explain from what I know about the whole swastika symbol has been used throughout the history. You get it? As we know, like swastika symbol is not unique to, as people imagine in like in Europe or like some parts of like Asia and anything. It's actually found throughout the world. You get it? It's been even depicted in it. Recently, they've even discovered like a swastika inscribed into woolly mammoth's tusk.
Oh.
That's like at least 10,000 years ago, 10,000 BC. Yeah, that's how far it goes back to. And that in itself shows that humanity has been using that symbol since recorded history. So it's generally understood to be like a solar symbol. So it marks the 4 different cycles of the seasons on 4 different directions, and it kind of like signifies the major turning point within the seasons, which is related to solstices and equinoxes as well. And they were like, what's actually like most common theme found throughout the history was like it has that kind of association with like a solar cult as well.
Oh yeah.
And even in Europe in ancient time, the Viking Age or like before Scandinavian, like people, there are like some objects found inscribed with like swastika symbols. Even in I've even recently saw an article discussing that there's actually a church, like a Templars church in England. That's actually quite ancient. It at least goes back to 1,000 years ago. It's still there, intact and everything. But even in that kind of a church, inside the church, they found a swastika inscribed in the church as well and everything. So it has that kind of esoteric association with even Knights Templar as well. So they kind of might have used that kind of esoteric symbol in their own spiritual practice as well. And so there's nothing really unique about the whole swastika. And then I want to dispel this whole notion that unfortunately, it has a big, association with that kind of horrible past and everything. But this is it was just a group of people at that time, which is quite recently, who misappropriated that symbol for their own kind of agenda and everything. But it's how do you put it? It's like taking one sacred symbol. It's like saying, okay, well, one horrible person did this, so everything that they've used must be bad. You get it? So that's like saying, well, I think I remember one guy was explaining, well, if you say if you're saying one, because they all have a common thing of using that and everything, so we can say the world dictators. Like Hitler had mustache. Does that mean people who have mustaches dictators and everything? Stalin had mustache. And everything. They had prominent association with that. So that's kind of ridiculous that just because they've used it.
Just 50, 60 years ago, it was just recently.
Yeah.
I mean, yes.
And one, as we know, swastika as a name, it actually comes from Sanskrit, right? So it has a deep root and association with Hinduism, as well as Buddhism and Jainism as well. for them, this is like extremely auspicious symbol. And now that it has that kind of like negative connotation, association attached to it, you know, it's actually quite sad, to be honest, to do it.
You told me this before. Is the Nazi swastika is a reverse version of this ancient swastika. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, going to that point, basically, not just swastika in general. There are like
every symbols.
Yeah, there are certain symbols. I can name a few examples. You can see the most common symbol you can see today in religions, like the cross symbol, right? The cross symbol is usually associated with Christianity.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I saw in a like satanic, like kind of like they reverse. They use the upside down cross. Is that there's like more satanic meaning?
Exactly. So, but even the cross symbol is not unique to Christianity. It has been like used in before, like pre-Christian religion as well. Like if you're talking about in Europe, like in Scandinavia, they were using like the solar cross symbol, which is like it's like a cross with a circle around it, so it symbolizes the sun in that sense. And they were using that, and that had a very sacred significance to those people as well. Swastika. What I want to say is basically like as a symbol can be used in both good or bad. You get it?
Yeah.
So I think the most common so you can say like sacred symbols. Symbols are like a universal language that people use to signify certain like higher principle. That can be like commonly used throughout the world as well. And I just want to talk about this whole inversion of that symbol. I think the most common people have the image of that inversion of that symbol that people think of is like the upside down pentagram. This is like the 5-pointed star that's like upside down and everything. But that's pentagram in itself is not satanic or anything. As you said, it's actually various sacred symbols as well that people used to use. It's been actually depicted in Taoism as well. And in Taoism, you think, well, what does that have to do with satanic thing? But in Taoist belief that the fine-pointed star actually symbolizes the 5 elements. So basically, you're talking about fire, earth, water, air, and ether, and that kind of thing. So they were using that for kind of ritual purposes and like elemental kind of like if you're talking about crochet and like that kind of thing, they use that to for their ritual practices and spiritual like attunement and everything. So this whole thing about if you're talking about pentagram and everything, pentagram in itself actually, and esoterically speaking, actually represents the human ascending into heavens, basically. So if you're talking about like even your own body, right? If you spread out like this, your legs split out
looks,
and everything. And
looks like a star fire.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like a star, right? Star symbolism. So that's what kind of represents the human body and soul as well. But if it's depicted in that kind of pictogram, it kind of like looks like a star, and star has always association with like the sky and higher realms, basically. So it's actually a very sacred symbol in that sense as well. But when we're talking about inverting that, symbol, right? It means descend into hell or onto the abyss, basically. Meaning like it's a fall. It represents the fall of man, basically.
Fall of a man.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I read something like in the inversion in itself doesn't exist as a symbolic thing. You get it? But those kind of like opposite forces are always there to combat the opposing forces, light or whatnot. So what they do is that because the opposing side does not have the symbol by themselves, so they need to invert it. So everything you invert becomes the opposite of what it's meant to be. Exactly. So the other example is like the symbol of cross.
Yeah.
I mean upside down cross has associated with satanic kind of like practice as well. But upright cross has the same symbolic association with like the Christ suffering on the cross and how he ascended into heaven after he been crucified on the cross, right? So it has that kind of association with man reuniting with his own kind of divine creator, basically, through that sacrifice. That's what I mean, for Christians it represents the sacrifice and suffering that Jesus went on to redeem us from our sins and whatnot. So it's actually a very holy symbol and everything. But if you took that and made it, turn it upside down, it means like
falling.
Exactly, it's a descent into hell, basically, into the realm of hell. So all that, the powerful symbolism that the Christ represented becomes inverted and becomes an antichrist symbol, basically. So in that kind of on the vein, let's look back to how Nazis used the swastika, basically. So swastika symbol in itself has its own kind of like way of depicting things. But if you see the SS Nazis like depiction of swastikas, it's actually tilted a bit. Yeah, it's not like diagonal or like on a straight line, and it's actually tilted. So what this kind of signifies is like it's actually trying to invert that symbolism, to draw in that power or opposite to that power. And if you're talking about the opposite inverted version of swastika, it's actually a very, very powerful inversion.
So like swastika, I mean this the ancient symbol. You said that sunshine, so reverse version of like or like reincarnation. That's like swastika's real real meaning. But if you reverse that, means like dark sun or moon or like. Well, what you said powerful, but which way? Like, negative powerful. I mean, what's that like?
So basically, it means that because swastika in itself is a very holy and powerful symbol, it is believed that it attracts a lot of like higher forces to you when you actually put that symbol around you. So if you have, let's say if you have like a swastika pictogram on your shirt, or like even as a pendant or any jewelry or accessories, you're actually attracting this higher forces to you, or the higher solar force to you. But if you actually invert that, it means you're doing what's actually the opposite of solar energy, lunar energy. Lunar energy, sun represents the light and the sunshine and everything. The lunar, if you invert it, it represents the lunar energy and the light of the moon and darkness, basically. So that's what they were trying to harness, that kind of like dark power, basically, or dark forces. And people say how's that possible? This sounds like a complete like BS basically. But like it's actually quite strange for me to think recently that how we become so, what do you call it, numb to this whole idea of symbolism in recent times. Because if you look carefully, symbolism is being used everywhere around you, in a very subtle way, but it has been used throughout society in different ways to calling auspiciousness or to attract a certain kind of like negative force and everything. There's so many like superstitions attached to like certain ideas about sacred geometry or like certain geometric patterns do cause certain frequency to like vibrate throughout the area as well. It's been noted, like that's why if you go to certain like Hindu temples in India as well, they've structured certain temples or even cities in certain geometric pattern in according to their kind of like a divine kind of like architectural design. So
I heard that the Kyoto is like city self-designed like the
so if you're talking about Kyoto as well, that's actually based on this whole Feng-shui and Taoistic kind of like belief that I've actually read a book somewhere that how the Kyoto city and everything is being constructed is actually completely aligned to the principle of Fushe and like Fushe and like the Taoistic belief that having the gate in front of the certain direction of the south or southeast and everything actually repels certain like negative and dark forces not to enter into that kind of certain enclosure. Everything is actually very complex kind of like setting they've done in Kyoto to actually protect people who are in that city. It was actually quite surprising how meticulous these people went to actually imbue that kind of principle and design into that kind of like city design and everything. So even like that kind of like as I was saying, like the Hindu temple and that kind of city was constructed to bring in certain auspiciousness and forces to their city, so it becomes blessed and protected with higher forces and everything. And a lot of things you can see, even in the architectural design, they've used swastikas a lot together. And then they've used it in their kind of like a bell on the bell. They've used like swastika kind of inscription and everything. Very like even the walls and like kind of like enclosure within certain structure and houses were done in like swastika design.
Only one thing I know is that it's in America. There's an airport named Denver Airport. It's like designed like if you look from like above, it looks like a swastika. That's only I know.
Yeah. So we have this kind of like idea that certain forces or structures bringing certain frequency, or, whether we believe it or not, together and everything. And I must say, it's kind of strange, like in society, those people who deny these things the most are actually the most superstitious people. In general, it's been proven many times over and over again. So I just want to say, I want to dispel this myth that swastika is like evil symbolism. It isn't. It's actually extremely sacred symbol. Has been used throughout history and throughout the world. It's been evidence is found in South America, North America, East Asia,
Even in England.
Yeah, Middle East, Southeast Southeast Asia, and all this, like in Europe as well. It's been used throughout human history in different civilizations together. And why would this, if this had no meaning, why would they employ these meaningless symbol all around the world? Like, look, I think ancient people, our ancestors, knew something about those kind of like symbolic structure that it's been repeated throughout this time. So to deny this like overwhelming kind of like evidence throughout the world seems a bit of a stretch to say that all these people are like deluded and they had no idea. I think, but to be honest, I mean, evidence is just stacks up too much to it for it to deny. So all I can say is like, please, if you see something or someone using swastika symbol, don't always associate it with hate and like horrid past.
But except the reverse version, right?
Exactly. It's except for the reverse version. Some people don't even know that, so they tattoo it on the forearm and everything. That's like that is stupidity in my opinion. I wouldn't do that if I knew the symbolism.
But what if this like a white rights like people? He put in a tattoo was a non-reverse version. Like if he puts like right version, that's where you get
all
like
I can say to that person is like good luck. But I mean, it's bad luck. It's that's why I'm not such a huge fan of tattooing. It's going off topic, but I was like, because especially when you tattoo like symbolism into your skin that you can't easily remove, you're constantly attracting that force to you, whether it's good or bad. You get it? If it's a good symbol, like the cross or solar cross, or like the swastika in the right way, but when people think swastika, the first image that comes up is that kind of like skinhead, neo-Nazi,
white boys,
white guys who hate all non-whites and everything. But we should really like dispel that kind of like notion behind swastika, because it's actually a disrespect to the other cultures who actively employ this sacred symbol in their religious practice. To get it, why on earth do Japan need to change that? The symbol on their own, or maps on the internet. Do you get it? That just shows how deep rooted this kind of like shame that was being attached to the symbolism. It's not fair to other people. Do you get it? It's like saying, well, let's just say, can you imagine if Hitler used like a Native American symbol for their own agenda and everything, and Apache symbol and everything, and he just used it on the flag, and he committed atrocities around the world and everything. Even if that war was ended, people will associate that with the negativity and everything. Imagine the persecution and negativity that these Native Americans may receive, because they might use that kind of like symbolism behind it. Do you get it? This is exactly what's happening with swastika. Do you get it? It's just like, it's actually quite interesting that the Hindu community doesn't voice this too much, because they're quite, I mean, like, if I may say so, like Indian culture in general are very laid back in general. Do you get it?
I guess so. Yes, yeah.
If you go to India, I've never been to India, but like from what I know, like from what I heard, it's like an Indian subcontinent is one of the most religiously diverse country or like a nation in the world. You get it? So you can find anyone with any religious conviction or faith. Okay? You find Muslims, Sikhs, obviously Hindu, Buddhists, Jains, you know, Christians.
Yeah,
you know,
I never see.
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
there is like.
Yeah, there is
Okay, there must be, yeah, but
everywhere you turn, there is that kind of people have certain faith, or like certain kind of religious kind of inclination as well. And what's interesting about India is like, because they accept that, or Hindu philosophy accepts basically that every religious expression is coming from one source, the source of all, which is like the Brahman, or like the absolute, as they call it. So even in one of the religious texts, I think one of the gods actually tells the devotees that accept all religions accordingly, because every expression comes ultimately from me, you get it? So it's that kind of like accepting. I think one person said like the Hindu religion is like what spiritual democracy looks like, you get it? Like every kind of like extreme form on a kind of like religious or spiritual expression is actually kind of like tolerated in India. So even if you're talking about the, because when people say Hinduism, they think of like, probably some people think of like one religion or something. It's that umbrella term. So meaning like Hinduism consists, they actually claim branch within Buddhism and Jainism, and even some form of Sikhism as well. They consider it to be an umbrella religion. So even in regional sense, they have many different practices according to that region. So some regions they have more devotees towards like Shiva, Lord Shiva, or the god Shiva, god of destruction and everything. But how they do it in certain regions in India, and let's say if they go to like northern part of India, they might have a completely different take on how they worship the same god. They don't have this strict kind of like rule on how they able to worship and everything. And it's interesting, like even in this if you divide Hinduism in a very broad, generalized kind of sect, you can actually divide it into three. So they're the Shivites who worship the Lord Shiva, and Brahmites who worship, who are associated with Lord Brahman, and Vaishnanas, which is like basically worshipping Lord Vishnu in his own different 10 different incarnations and everything. So even within the Shivites kind of like sect, they have this kind of like the Agori sect. Agori sect is like a sect of ascetics in which they hang around the funeral pyres.
I know this one, Agori. Yeah, I saw that one of a documentary. I forgot, it's been ages.
Exactly.
They kind of like, I won't say weird, but just like not weird.
They're considered to be like unorthodox in the way of approach.
I remember they were drinking like some like water from the skull, something like this.
So they will use like a skull cap to drink their libation from and everything. But that skull cap has even a meaning behind it. So they usually, Agoris carry the skull cap usually from their own master or mentor who passed away to get it.
Oh really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those mentors of Agori who passed away and everything, they're being obviously cremated and everything. So that what the disciple of that, the master takes the skull cap of the skull of the master, he cuts it open and makes a drinking vessel out of that, because they believe that that master's energy still resides in there. So do you get it? So if you literalistically use that in your own practice, you're actually still gaining certain spiritual power from your own master.
It sounds like the story you told me before, like when they doing the black magic, they use like deer's skull.
Yeah.
That's why the reason why, because you can like get harness the power from that same the creature or something. It sounds like kind of like a little bit similar to that.
You know, I mean, historically speaking, like skulls or animal parts or like even human skulls been used in the past to actually draw in spirits, and in like a necromantic kind of way. I mean, like, when people say necromancy, you're practicing black magic. Not really. Well, not in a sense. Historically speaking, it was more like, when people say necromancy, what does necro mean? Well,
dead body?
Yeah, exactly. It has association with, death exactly, death and dead body and everything. But what they do was like, skulls were, especially like human skulls, were heavily used for ancestral worship in ancient times. Yeah. Because, there's even that kind of practice in which they call in their ancestors through. I remember, like, even in ancient Europe, back in pre-Christian times, they used to have skull of one of the deceased family members, and they always carry that, always display around the house to get it, in order to accommodate that kind of like that deceased person's spirit to actually inhabit that skull again. So they'll still be part of their family to get it. So even when they have a meal and everything,
they put the skull on the table.
Skull on the table too. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And then the patriarchy of that family will explain to the kids that this is your grandfather.
Grandfather's here.
Respect him, and he's with us, and we should eat together, and everything. It was that kind of level of and if you say this in recent years, it's it sounds really strange, but this is what people used to do.
I think it's I don't know, it sounds
exactly.
Not scary. I mean, grandfather's we joined in at the dinner with us today.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they had this notion that bones and skulls had a spiritual connection, or with ancestors and dead people, or even certain spirits and deities can possess kind of thing. So from that kind of perspective, you can see Agoris, when they take the master's skull and use it ritualistically in their drinking vessels and everything. It feels as though they're trying to draw in the spirit of their master into the skull again, maybe to even commune. Who knows? Because the kind of necromantic rites in which you can actually draw in certain spirits into the skull. You can even actually communicate with one another. It's being recorded. So I don't know what the Agoris do specifically on that time, but it feels like that's part of the ritual. And what was I saying? And the Agoris, they hang around the funeral pyres and everything, and they smear their whole body with the
crushed bones or something like this, wasn't it?
No, just the ash, the remaining ash of the funeral pyre and everything. So they always, when you actually see Agoris, they always look
white, all the dust on the.
They always look grey, the skin, because they're smearing the ash onto their body and everything. But this practice actually comes from their own deity worship, because Lord Shiva is known to hang around in cremation grounds, in which he'll smear himself with the funeral pyre ash, and he'll basically drink drink from the
Piss.
skull.
Yeah,
Drink from the skull.
Yeah.
And even, yeah, exactly, and all that. Everything. It's just like, so it feels like a gore is mimicking what the deity actually represents, because Lord Shiva actually represents destruction, transformation, and death, and he is the ruler over the dead realm as well. So he is the Lord of Ghosts as well, meaning like he has command of all the ghosts in the
command of ghosts.
Yeah, on the death realm and then as well. Yeah, so even like, so the religious kind of like mythology even states that even the demons worship Lord Shiva. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are like many tales in which some kind of repentant demon wanted to worship certain deities. The first person they go to is like Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva accepts all devotees. No matter where your background is from, even if you're like ghost or a demon, you can worship him in order to gain favors from that god. You get it? So yeah, there's actually some few stories where some demons actually became a disciple of Lord Shiva. They even became some kind of like venerated saints. So it's really interesting. So like a gory in that sense, they were smearing their own shit. They even, from what I hear, they even practice cannibalism as well.
Yeah.
So what they do is like in the remaining funeral pyre, they even like take the burning charred body from the funeral pyre and they actually consume it.
What do you mean consume it? Like
meaning they'll just eat it. And people are saying, what the hell are these people doing? They're crazy and everything. But according to understanding of Shivites or the Agoris, is like everything you see around you actually comes from the divine. You get it? So there's nothing unclean about anything. You get it?
True. Yeah.
So being able to go against that, it's a taboo to, smear like funeral pyre ash onto yourself. Right? It looks kind of really strange and like even scary and everything. But they happily embrace that because they know that that kind of like embracing that kind of like something you consider to be taboo is actually like a liberation for them. So it's they're going against their fears. Because people say so Agori's path is like a left-hand path, meaning like what people say right-hand path is more like conservative and orthodox way of doing things. Like, you go to church and like you pray and you praise God. And, like, you have a devotion follower, and then Vaishnava followers, Lord Vishnu followers are more like right-hand path devotees. But Shivites in general, they're like, you can say they're more like left-hand.
Yeah.
Or if you're talking about Gauri, I mean, you could worship Lord Shiva in the right-hand path. Of course, you have a temple of Lord Shiva, and because he gives benefits to devotees as well. So it's that kind of like embrace, and like they say like, so a Gauri's path is like, it's actually quite risky and dangerous kind of path because you're actually going towards a kind of like more extreme side of things. But they believe that being able to go against that kind of darkness or fear, you can actually transform that into divine energy or light, basically. Because you're extracting light from darkness, basically. So what they're trying to do is like, I don't know how to put it, but like, like if you're talking about in the mundane kind of level of everyday life and people in general, right? Let's say you want to do certain things, like you want to do certain projects, or you want to like talk to that person and everything, but there's that fear in you, right? Sometimes, and that's actually debilitating you and like stopping you from doing everything. But if you actually, go
Once you
against
try and break.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. If you actually go against that fear and everything, the other side could be wonderful. It could lead into success and happiness and whatnot. So, because they believe that. So going back to Gories, they believe that the only way to conquer darkness is to go against the darkness.
Okay, that's interesting way to
exactly.
think.
That's why it's so. Yeah, that's one way. That's why so not many people actually succeed in the Agori's path in the true sense of the word. And people say it takes about 20 years to actually be a true Agori. So practicing that kind of thing every day.
Yeah.
They have no possessions, no clothing except for their own.
Yeah, so most of naked and just
exactly.
it's like more. I'm sorry to using this word, but it's just like more. I don't know, dark version of a caveman or something. I don't know, just something.
It's a very primitive and primal way of living, but it comes from the whole philosophy of detachment. It's because they believe that this world is not real. So why should you get attached to material things? You shouldn't own things. You should just live as you are, and embracing all that kind of tactic and everything. So it's actually quite interesting and profound philosophy. So going back to it, so that's why going back to it, and what I wanted to say, the Hindu kind of religion accepts all that kind of thing. Of course, if you're talking about Gori, they're being feared, but they're being respected at the same time. They're considered to be holy.
From whom? Who's
the Hindu?
Really?
Hindu population in general, they absolutely respect the Agoras.
Oh yeah, okay.
They don't consider it to be some kind of out. Well, they do seem kind of because they're really considered to be holy. So you shouldn't just go up to them and talk to them. Yeah. So yeah. So I was saying so it was kind of going back to this whole using that kind of a sacred symbol and everything. What I want to say is I want to dispel this whole myth.
ごめん、じゃあちょうどこれ一回ストップしようぜ。ちょうどまたその話に戻るんだけど、一回ストップして。
Okay, so